Welcome, everyone, to part 4 with Kenneth Scott of Pantera Vita and also the Gemstone University. And we're going to be continuing on from part 3, and where we left off was dealing with the understanding, the comprehension of the practicality of the work that Ken has brought through with the law as it affects us spiritually, physically, in 3D, and outside of here, and what the contracts are in relation to this reality and what we live. So I think we left off talking about the practical aspects of it in the 3D reality. And maybe you can go on from there, and then we can go into where we are, which is 2026, the year of the fire horse. And wow, yes,
Hmm.
fire.
It's the fire horse.
It's the year of the fire horse, and
So
we're
do the Chinese years rotate through the four um, uh, what do earth, air, fire, water.
yeah,
So is it, you have the year of the horse. This is the fire year. 12 years from now, it will
yeah,
be the water or air
yeah.
and so forth. Okay, well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I happen to be a horse. I am about to start well, actually, I'm about to start my 72nd year in this form on this planet. And yeah.
Well, and then we've got a very powerful alignment, which we haven't had for 400 years, which is also, if you couple the alignment, the celestial alignment that we have with the year of the fire horse, and mind you, it's not really 2026. It's not really the date that we know, the Gregorian calendar, which was, a part of the hijacking and taking everything over, reducing a 13-month year into a 12. So is it really 2026? No, it's not really 2026.
Well,
We don't even know what it is.
according to the Romans, it's 2026.
Well, yeah, but they instituted that calendar and took away the real calendar, and it's a way to get everybody off track of what's really where we really are, right, in
Hmm.
time. So, but according to, yes, the this calendar, it is the year of the fire horse connected with this celestial alignment that is incredibly powerful with Mars in the center of it. Mars war. So, yes, we'll continue talking about the geopolitical situation and
And the rest of the mess we're in.
uh-huh. Yeah.
It's like Laurel and Hardy, when uh, Hardy says, "This is a fine mess you've gotten me in again."
Oh,
Well, it's a fine mess that we've gotten ourselves into, but we are actually so capable. We are so capable that we've taken on the clothing of the realm of the matrix and the construct, because we were capable to reconfigure it, and that's where we're really at, basically, to take the individual and the collective clothing of the realm, which is the upside down, inside out, ass backwards, obverse mirroring of reality, or the life template, into this false narrative matrix that seemingly is so real, and coming to, in the continuum of our awakening process, coming to realize that we indeed created it, by allowing the film, whether it's a Hollywood film or the cosmic film, to run through our bio-crystalline virtual reality projecting unit called this embodied form, to create the similitude of reality that seems so real. It has a ectoplasmic substance of our creator capacity because that's where it came from,
Mhm.
because we're dealing with the parasite that has completely severed itself from its source connection, its creational capacity, and so it cannot create. And
No.
that's what's sort of a priori of maximum importance for people to really understand. And when I say people, I'm saying those who are awake or awakening. Nobody is truly fully awake.
Mhm.
Neither Lauda or I are really fully awake, but we certainly are more advanced in the stages of that to be able to see what we see and know what we know. But the people listening here that we're talking to are in the awakening and embodying process, and to really understand who we really are and what this similitude of reality is, and understand that we did take it on by will, purpose, and intent because we have the capacity to transmute it,
Mhm.
transform it, resolve the karmic entanglements, which includes the ancestral lineage that are in our physical bodies and the genetic system, the living library of our genetics in every cell, and understand that when we withdraw consent, when we sever the attachments and the entanglements, do the inner work for the transmuting, transforming, and resolving, then we are literally in an exponentially expanding way, withdrawing the capacity of the false narrative or the parasite to run its movie.
Mhm.
So what I'm experiencing in living through these moments that we're in right now is the end of the movie, which is nothing more than a repetitive cycle that continually has been looping in
Yeah.
infinite number of times. That repetitive cycle has a endpoint. It's what the last literary construct of setting out the script called the Bible, what it said is the end times in the book of Revelation and all of this stuff, that we're in the end times. Is it the end of the of the world? No, it's the end of their chronological, sequential script that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then the end happens, like the movie stops, you leave the theater goes dark,
Mhm.
and then you walk out and it's a reset and a renewal back to the beginning.
Mhm.
And the Bible in the book of Genesis starts with the words in the beginning. But what I learned recently is that the Hebrew is Bereshet, which has a similar sound phonetically to be reset.
Mhm.
So it just says it right there because they always have to tell us, they always have to put it out in plain sight. It's hidden in plain sight for those with eyes who can see and ears who can hear and hearts that can know. It's always self-evident because they have to. They have to put it in a mirrored reflection so that we, inductively take it back down into our center point of creation, and we start remanifesting the same script.
Mhm.
And they have the technology to do that. They have the technology to create the dome firmament containment, and they have the technology to run it to the end of its cycle, to the collapse, wipe the screen. It's like you're literally,
Mhm.
now that I'm saying it, it's a very good metaphor. You're in a movie theater, it's dark, you're watching the movie, and when the movie ends, the theater goes dark. And what happens when it goes dark is our memory is wiped,
Mhm.
and we suddenly find ourselves in this amorphous um, field of nothingness, and then suddenly we're back incarnating, we're back in the reset, and then the gods come along and they basically say be reset. In the
Mhm.
beginning there's a new heaven and a new earth, because the heavens, the stars and everything else that are up there in the heavens have basically been reset. They won't be the same. It won't be Pisces and Aries and these stars. It'll be all jumbled up again. The
Mhm.
great
Mhm.
AI God in the sky will just reshuffle it like the shuffling boots at the blackjack table in Las Vegas. It reshuffles the cards. Instead of 52 cards, it's 10 billion cards,
Mhm.
and it just resets a new construct. It's a new heaven and a new earth. Our minds and our memories
Yeah.
have been wiped because we have gone into the polarization of the disconnect and allowed it to happen. But this time, that's not going to happen that way, at least for those who choose to disconnect from the polarized contractual bondage that we purposefully allowed ourselves to be in. But now we have risen above the mass hallucination of the consensus reality of the mass
Yeah.
population sufficiently that now, as they play out the last lines of the movie, the last act, which we're going to talk about today, that we can just watch it like a movie,
Mm-hmm.
and understand we're not it, withdraw our greater projection into it so that it will achieve its endpoint agenda, which would be the collapse and the reset,
Yeah.
and see how it goes. For myself, I don't know how it's going to go. I don't
Mm-hmm.
claim at this point to say, well, I know exactly what's going to happen, because anybody who's saying, I know what's going to happen is reading the script of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the so-called psychics and the seers and the remote viewers that think they're seeing some layers of future reality or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
they're just looking at the infinitude of layered projections, multiple screens in the movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
So for me right now, I'm actually enjoying being truly in the mystery of it
Mm-hmm.
and being as more and more possible, being in the present moment, the eternal moment of now, and allowing it to unfold and be guided by my inner being, my spirit, and basically in my experience and in our experience, Andrea and others we're working with, the acceleration of synchronicity, what we would call synchronicity,
Mm-hmm.
what religified people would call the miracles of the divine or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that the synchronicities are just showing up and the people are connecting and really opening up in more and more of our ability to truly direct and create our reality and walking through this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at, where we're at right now. And so we're going to get into that today in our conversation.
Yeah, so we don't end up back in the theater in another movie.
Right. And that's really the key. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's really the key in the grounding of our work and my work in law and understanding the true mechanics and energetics of law. And as I think uh, Lauda and many viewers don't necessarily know, but my history is that in the late 80s, 89, 90, is when I first got into studying law.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very inner directed pathway to the steps. Certain events in my life created the circumstances that essentially there was one door to open and one door to walk through, and that was the study of law and progressively monetary systems, banking, money mechanics, and the historical context of that, and then integrate it with my knowledge and my experience up to that point of esoterica and the things that we were just talking about, you and I off camera are talking about celestial alignments and stuff, astrology and so forth. Well, according to that, I was born as a Pisces, and
Mm-hmm.
I was born in a 9 year, and I'm entering a 9 year on my 72nd birthday coming up in about six
Mm-hmm.
weeks. And a lot of interesting numerology. But my point about why I bring that up is because in my earlier years, I was totally Piscean. I was totally in the mystical realm you know, of what a Piscean nature is, which is, the 12th house and very mystical and all that. But as I started studying law, and because I was involved in business and international business since I was 20, and I had a very strong sense of an international, worldwide experience in the physical reality, more and more I came more and more into the physical and studying law and understanding it with the background of the Piscean nature, the metaphysical and the multidimensional and the spiritual, and the energetic and all the rest of it. that my path in the last 35 years was walking through the physical and integrating it and actually coming more and more and more into the physical.
Hmm.
And as opposed to the general universal uh, if we can call them principles or uh, foundational points of spirituality, whether it's what people consider, oh, it's spiritual. It's a spiritual path, not a religious path. It doesn't matter whether it's religious or spiritual or everything in between. The one foundational principle is it's not here, it's out there. And people go out and they're seeking, I got to get out of here. I want to ascend. I want to rapture. I want to be
Hmm.
safe, whatever it is.
Hmm.
And that's just the perfect, very simple bait and switch to keep everybody focused where we're not and not
Hmm.
focused where we're supposed to be, out of the body and not really taking responsibility for this realm that we actually created.
Hmm.
So my work has been an integration of the law, the multidimensional, the esoteric, and the physical reality of understanding where really basically where the rubber meets the road.
Hmm.
And so, um,
And why everything is connected to really, in essence, law,
right.
everything.
Hmm.
And the laws are connected to how we're contracted. So, in creation of where we're at, and where we're at is not, it is, I mean, it's fascinating. The deeper you go into this, is very fascinating how this even, how our relation is to the creation of this facsimile projection system and what reality actually is. And you're right, like, the focus shouldn't be out there because we're here. So it needs to be inward, in the center,
Yeah.
within.
The only way out is in.
Hmm.
But what does that mean? In, does that mean, you know, go inside, meditate, and just ignore the external reality? Or does that mean into the physical, into taking total reclamation to reclaim our complete whole system as an incarnate form? That's the physical body, the flesh, bone, blood, lymph, brain matter, mitochondria, the cells,
Hmm.
and most especially the genetics. Because the genetics, we can clearly see, especially what's happened in the last 5, 6 years, that the prize, the
Mm.
absolute prize, the brass ring on the merry-go-round is the human embodied genetics. And to take control of that and bind it and bond it to the binary coded computerized AI construct of a transhumanistic fusion,
Yeah.
supposedly a man and machine. And this is the work that we've done in Pantera and in our process of embodying the law and status correction and all the rest of it. And it gets down to a very simple formula, which is we are in a universal creational field, an expression that we would call a universe, within which, as a whole system dynamic system
Hmm.
of, like the Russian dolls, the smaller and smaller
Hmm.
we go, it's the same thing, but it's built on the same template, but it's smaller in scale, down to the atom,
Hmm.
which theoretically is physical, but it's not really physical, and it's energetic and all the rest of the that in quantum physics. But in this creational field that we would call a universe, there is a priori foundational principle, which is sovereign free will. It's the total absolute embodiment through individuated expression of living beings that we have sovereign free will. It's an absolute. And as such, the only way we co-create together is through coming together by the principles of the law of contracts, entering into two agreements that a contract requires full disclosure, a meeting of the minds, just and equitable compensation, equitable exchange, value for value, and things like that. So that creates the law. Contract creates the law. And because I've studied the law in this world system for 35 years, I see that as an absolute, that everything that's constructed in the system is fundamentally based on that. And in order for a contract to be valid, there must be mutual consent. And so, in this great document that's considered the pinnacle or the fountainhead of freedom called the Declaration of Independence, it says in there, um, consent, government by the consent of the governed. So that sounds really laudable,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to use your name, the laudable, uh, the positive expression of that. But it's actually that which binds us to this governmental matrix system, because they go on the presumption of consent.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're consenting to the vast amount of contracts that they've laid out before us to do everything and anything we want to do to live in this reality and bind us to the terms and conditions of that contract, this is why it goes back to the reset. Be reset, but when it's reset, the new heavens and the new earth are completely exposed. It's full disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your program.
Mm-hmm.
Here's your perceived heavens and earth in the celestial design of the zodiacal wheel, and the sun and the moon and whatever else shows up in the next reset. And on that first instant of revelation or opening to the new earth and the new heavens, all the terms of the contract and all the conditions and all the constructional intersecting dynamics, it's hidden in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
And we enter into that contract. And then we go through what's called time for thousands and thousands of years and bind ourselves to the god of time known as Kronos or Saturn. And we go on to that linear construct and we walk through time, playing out the script, ending up at the end and basically fulfilling our obligation to remain bonded and bound to their narrative that we've accepted as real,
Mm-hmm.
and then once again, over and over again. And so that's the basis of law. And so that phrase, government by the consent of the governed, look around. We've got billions of people who have essentially tacitly and implicitly consented to the world government that's now unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
And it has all of the earmarks and the construction of a binary coded, polarized, AI controlled, AI Godhead construct of binary expression, light and dark, good and bad, black and white squares on the floor of Westminster Abbey, where Parliament creates all the rules that bind the estates of all the people who are treated as infants, and therefore they must be bound to the rules of the narrative. And we give our consent over and over again. So that's what my study of law and everything else over the last 35 years, in my 72 years walking in this physical reality and waking up and remembering a lot of things about what we have done over eons of time and repetitive cycles in time
Mm-hmm.
to come to this endpoint. And it's all hidden in plain sight. It is all there. So we can't say, you didn't tell us what the rules were. You didn't tell us the nature of the contract. You didn't tell us what we were getting for the benefit of, what we were getting in terms of benefits and privileges to live in this reality that you say you're the God and we're the
Mm-hmm.
minions. And so we're in the dominion, in the dome, and we're the minions of this Godhead and all the rest of it. And really the fundamental response is, just like the good witch said to Dorothy, you've always known how to go home. You've always had the way to go home. And that's what we're coming into. We know how to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, we've never not been home. We've
Mm-hmm.
just been hanging around in this false narrative, doing what we came here to do, and now the time is to take it to the next level as they take it to the end point of their script.
A part of this also is consent is also through omission,
Hmm.
right? So you may not necessarily be thinking you're consciously consenting, but if you don't do anything at all, they take that as a consent. They take that as a yes.
Yes. Um, there's a fundamental rule in law. If you do not timely and properly object, whether that's objecting to a jurisdictional presumption
Hmm.
that I'm in the jurisdiction of their courts and they bring me in by some sort of contract, I signed a ticket or whatever, I've been served papers and I go in, there's a fundamental in law, we have the ability to timely and properly object to the presumption of consent.
Hmm. It's your kitty.
Yes.
Aw.
Django, what do you want?
Django, come up and say hi.
Come here. Psst, psst. Come on. Say hello to everybody.
Come here, Django. I want to see Django.
Yeah, hang on one second. Come here. What are you doing? Okay, Django.
Oh.
Say hello to everybody.
Oh, he's so cute. Look at those eyes. Oh, I think you're adorable, Django. You got big eyes, saucer eyes. Do you have a little UFO? He's got these huge eyes. They're so beautiful. Thanks, Django.
Okay, see ya.
It's always a perk, when I get to see
Yeah.
the little ones. Makes my day. So,
Good.
yeah, so they have a part of the law that says if you don't actually say no, then that's a yes.
Yeah. Well, break the word down. Con basically means with.
Hmm.
Sent, which is the root of sentience or cognitive awareness of
Hmm.
something. So when we consent, the presumption is that we cognitively are aware,
Hmm.
and we're proceeding with that cognitive awareness within whatever the framework. In terms of the legal
Hmm.
system, that framework would be subject matter or in personam jurisdiction. Subject matter means it has to do with things,
Hmm.
and those things are attached to codes and statutes and other constructs of the legal monetary system,
Hmm.
or in personam, that the court claims in personam jurisdiction over your person.
Hmm.
And there's many, many layers if we get into talking about functionality of how the law works. And you've heard me speak, and most people who are familiar with my work and what I've put out there into
Hmm.
the public is that um, I lost my train of thought. um, oh, forget it. Okay, it'll come back.
And that takes me also to like the duality system that they've designed, where they're offering it. So for me, this reminds me of Saturn and Jupiter, right?
Hmm.
So if Saturn rules, it's going to be with a heavy hand, right? And Jupiter, if Jupiter rules, Jupiter is going to give you some perks, but it's the exact same thing. It's the exact same agenda, and they're going to go to the exact same place in manifesting that agenda. Only one is a heavy hand, a heavy hammer, and the other one's going to say, well, I'm going to give you some perks, but I'm going to hammer you.
Yeah. Well, what's the origin of Jupiter as the Roman god?
Mm-hmm.
That comes from Zeus, who
Yep.
became, then became in Rome the Jovian god, which is translated to Jupiter, but it also relates to the Nordic pantheon, and basically that's who Thor is. And what is
Mm-hmm.
Thor's primary tool or weapon? It's the hammer.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who don't know Thor, that's where the the name of the day of the week Thursday comes from. It's Thor's day. So
Hmm.
that's Jupiter's day. And so basically, the celestial construct is basically the seven heavens or the seven layers of the different gods. And Saturn sits at the seventh layer. So, and then Jupiter or Zeus would be at the sixth level. So
Hmm.
that would be corresponding to our inner eye and our inner capacity to see. So Jupiter is expansive, but he will also use the hammer to keep you in place. To Jupiter or Thor, you're just a nail, and
Hmm.
he's got the hammer. And so but we're locked into the construct of time through these seven layers and how they correspond to the physical body and the so-called seven chakras.
Hmm.
And that's why Salome danced the dance of the seven veils to lock in those seven mechanical so-called chakras, which are an overlay. They're part of the mechanicality of the control system, as opposed to our true physical and energetic bioresonant field in
Hmm.
which we really have our being. So, studying astrology and astronomy and the esoteric nature of all of that gives us a guide and a pathway to seeing where the overlay is versus where the substance is.
Hmm. Yeah, and that takes us to as above, so below. It also takes us to the illusion of the changing of the guard, which is a trick that they use because it's the same force operating, but they're going to give you a version that makes you think it's good and it's a changed guard system when in fact it isn't,
Hmm.
which is what we're witnessing.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well,
mm,
well, what we're witnessing right now is basically, it's certainly the end of the script. They're
yep.
playing it out. And it's basically good cop versus bad cop, good God versus bad God. And for me, in my studies that I've done all this time, on top of all the law study and the monetary mechanics and that whole system, my real passion is studying how the esoterica and all of those systems in symbology and everything
Hmm.
where it all interfaces with the matrix code, which is the legal and the monetary system, with the true um, creative expression of these bodies, the true body, not the overlaid body, not the body that's hardwired to all the false mechanics and everything. And that, in my studies, has taken me back to really getting into the Sumerian
Hmm.
construction of things and where everything evolved or derived from Sumer in
Hmm.
terms of both language, in terms of the whole construct of the gods, the temples, the religion, the priests, of course, the priesthood, and the so-called descent of divine right of kings. So you've got the king and the priest,
Hmm.
everything that I always talk about.
Hmm.
And, the most fundamental construction in the Sumerian and succeeding systems is always the god of the light and the god of the dark, you
Hmm.
know. And we've
Hmm.
got that in Enlil and we've got it in Enki. And
Hmm.
Enki is the lord or the priest of the earth, and he's the model of what followed with
Hmm.
Osiris and Horus and the Babylonian gods and Marduk and on into the Greeks and the Romans and so forth. And Enlil is the hammer. So you
Hmm.
could even see the two as Jupiter on the one hand is the expanse of Zeus. He's got, his totem is the thunderbolt, the electricity. So he's the god of the electrical system,
Hmm.
which is derived obviously from El and El Elyon, who's the most high, who is Saturn, and Saturn is time. And by going into that, consent of that construct, we bind ourselves into time.
Hmm.
So we have this path of light, and now we're in this complete system worldwide of fiber optics, where all data information and the AI system is carried on beams of light running through silica, through glass,
Mhm.
and delivered straight into our brain.
Mhm.
And so that's Enki, that's the god of light, that's a Luciferian expression, that's the new age of love and light. Everything's love and light, and go into the light and be the light and all the rest of it. And then there's the dark. Then there's the other side, the other brother, because Enlil became Set in the Egyptian construct. And of course, the triangulation of the three patriarchal gods is Anu, Enlil, and Enki.
Mhm.
And so, but when Anu in his dark side merges with or integrates with the Dark Lord or Set or Enlil, then it becomes Set Anu or Satan or Set Anu,
Mhm.
so Enki is the worshiping of the false light narrative, but it's still the polarity. It's still
Yeah.
dark and light, dark and white. I mean, black and white or dark and light.
Mhm.
And there you go. And that's what we're now seeing in its final scripting.
Mhm. Yeah, let's talk about that a little more, of what we're seeing in that final scripting, as well as in relation to the geopolitical situation and just how this subtle division, this polarity is being presented.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, let's do what we did before we started recording, and I showed you a couple of things on.
Okay.
But you know what? Can you pause the recording for a second?
Hmm.
Just take. Yeah. Okay. So we went over this before we started the recording. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
Um, there's the forest again. Um, so somebody posted this in our chats. We have a platform called Keybase that Pantera members have various chats. We do a lot of project work and research together there, and have a news chat and other chats. And so some, excuse me, somebody posted this. You can see this on your screen.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So this I was really impressed to see. It basically put into a very succinct, defined um, wording and imagery of exactly where we're at. It's essentially expresses what I have been bringing forward for a long time, our previous conversations and Lauda's work. Lauda very much sees this as well. And so this comes from they have a YouTube channel called the Ether Vault, so if you want to look at their work. And so I'll just read through it. It starts at the top, the two agendas. So what we're talking about is the apparent bifurcation, but this is the false bifurcation of the false light, false dark. Um, Hang on, I'm going to bring you, there we go. Um, uh, it's basically two agendas, one grid, two textures. So this is essentially the black and white checkerboard floor of Masonic temples, of Westminster Abbey, and basically everywhere where the agenda has been being constructed and integrated into the matrix system. And everything is about the Machiavellian divine and conquer, and playing two sides against the middle. And as much as a lot of people know this, a lot of people see this, we have to really know that the vast majority of the world's population, even those who consider themselves relatively awake, they don't see it. So we can go into all the alternative media and all the political machinations of back and forth, and it's right there. They're still flowing themselves into one of the two component parts of the bifurcation. And so it's essentially two agendas, one grid, two textures. And on the left side is essentially the dark side. It's the satanic side. It's the iron prison. It's where the 1984, we're in the Orwellian speak in that book. It says, you want to know the future of humanity? It's a black boot standing on the neck of a human face. And that's, the fascistic draconian control system based on what? Fear and control. That's Agenda A. It's the Iron Prison. It's the Enlil faction. It's the Dark Lord. It's the basically the Enlil and Sumer. It is the set as the dark twin of Osiris in Egypt, and basically all the way to Yahweh and the patriarchal trinity, Father, Son, etc. It's based on fear and control. It's the Great Reset, it's the pandemics and the collapse, and what is everybody talking about now? The collapse of the monetary system, the end point where the dollar is imploding and the entire monetary system is basically about to collapse, and we're about to go into a deep implosion, and all that people fear about that because we have it in our ancestral genetics. Our parents and grandparents went through the Depression and the world wars and all of that. And it goes further back. It goes into all the mini resets during the grand cycle, resets of whatever chronological time frame that we want to put to it. Jason Brashears in Archaics talks about 138 years. Other people talk about 200 years. There's other different chronological, and this is all the panoply of the chronos, or the chronological Saturnian control matrix, which is the time and the repetitive cycles that's contained in the trauma in our physical body, and especially in the ancestral memory in the genetics that we have in our bodies. So, of course, we just went through a pandemic and all of that. We're facing the imminence of perceived collapse. It's digital slavery. It's the breaking of the human spirit that finally relents and acquiesces to the control system and just says, okay, I'm yours, take care of me, and you can have me, and I will go wherever you tell me to go, into the transhumanistic agenda. And it's all trauma based. So, as you can see on the left, on the right, you have Agenda B, which is the golden cage. This is Enki, the Luciferian, the light principle, the new age love and light that sees everything as rosy, and don't look at the dark stuff because that's not real. It has no effect because we're of love and light. And people have to remember that every religion is a new age religion. So, it's the zodiacal changes of the ages. So we're leaving Pisces, going into the Aquarian age. But that's what happened 2000, roughly 2100 years ago, leaving the Aryan age and going into the Piscean age. So Christianity is a new age religion.
Mhm.
The Old Testament biblical context, which basically started to be implemented between the shift from Taurus, the sign of the bull, to Aries, the sign of the ram or the sheep and the lamb. So each age lays down the symbolic and the energetic and the constructional building blocks that will be manifested through chronological sequence of 2,000 years of time. And then there'll be another shift in the heavens, the same script that I described at the Be Reset, New Heaven, New Earth. That's the script that was imprinted on us in the very beginning. So it feels familiar because it is, because we were imprinted when we were reset. And the gods, the AI system said, be reset in a new heaven, new earth, a new script, which is nothing but the same old script
Mhm.
dressed up in new clothes.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so familiar. And then there's the dread of the negative side of the ancestral memory, which is, oh shit, here we go. They're going to suck us in. They're going to collapse us. They're going to wipe our memory and our higher function and our connection to source, which they never can disconnect from source, us from source, because if they did, the whole thing would collapse. They need us to project this into their holographic movie theater.
Mhm.
Okay. But they can wipe out the higher functions and the higher mind and the higher memories so that when you wake up in the new heaven and the new earth, it's amnesia and you pretty much have to start rebuilding yourself. And then you take 10,000, 12,000 years, you rebuild yourself, you start remembering who you really are, who we really are. And then we're at the end point. And it's like going over Niagara Falls with a barrel. Oh shit, here we go again.
Mhm.
You know? So, and they just posit the same thing. It's always good cop, bad cop, the light versus the dark. Enlil or Enki is the light, and Enlil as the dark. Enlil is Satan, Enki is the Luciferian expression.
Mhm.
So that's the golden cage, the golden age, you know, that's what they put into the end script is, oh, when all this happens in the book of Revelation, we're going to go into the golden age. So what has Trump been talking about? What is the whole thing that's been really foisted in the last 12 months on the psyche of the mass population? That if you follow this direction, you're going to go into the golden age, and then we'll go to heaven, we'll be with Jesus, we'll be with God, and all the rest of it, and won't it be wonderful? And but in the Bible, it says the golden age will be what? 1,000 years.
Mhm.
Well, that's all we get. We get 1,000 years, and then we
Mhm.
have to go back, you know, and you know, it's like
Mhm.
1,000 years of peace, you know, and then the clock runs out, and it's like, oh shit, 12 more hours, and then the golden age of peace for 1,000 years is over. That
Mhm.
means we have to give up peace tomorrow morning and pick up the guns and go back to war for another 11,000 years or so,
Mhm.
you know? So, and there's a reason for that 1,000 years, which we can get to in a moment. But anyway, so on the right side, you have this golden glow. You've got the robot. You've got um, the UFOs. You've got Jesus and the sun god at the top, and you have comfort in technology. But it's always an externalized technocratic control system of technology that gives now it's Brave New World. It's Aldous Huxley's counterpoint to Orwell's 1984,
Mhm.
um, both of whom came from elite families who knew what the script was. And so one would, you know, woke up enough to say, I know where this is going. It's 1984. And the other woke up and said, no, I know where this is going. It's going to Brave New World. And so that's going into the digital age and all of the superficial external palliatives of the digital system, you know, whatever that may be, the entertainment, the banking, the money, or whatever, it's all digitized, which is a binary coded system as it
Mhm.
is. So it's Agenda 47. Hmm. So we're
Mhm.
in the Trump era of the 47th president.
Mhm.
It's the smart cities. It's the AI paradise. It's the seduction of the human soul rather than the breaking of the human spirit. And it's based on basically the mind false illusion of paradise or salvation and all of the rest of what religion or secular religion of the brave new world, what that all represents and promises.
Mhm.
The bottom line down here is either way you give up your sovereignty. Either way, the AI wins either plan. Okay, either path. So, so this is constructed in whole from the beginning of a reset.
Yeah.
And as I said, the minute you wake up with the mind wipe and we're back to primitive levels of things, no technology, it's completely infused into the genetics. And we have the genetic memory of the ancestral lineal memory from our physical embodiment and all of the ancestral lineage that our living library of genetics has basically infused into our genetics. So it is the false binary, a sophisticated, quote, good cop, bad cop routine played out by the archontic AI to ensure that no matter which way the coin
Hmm.
lands, heads or tails, the house, which is the matrix, always wins. But
Yep,
there's,
checkmate.
yeah, but there is a middle path. It doesn't always win, and there is a an anomaly that they can't account for. They can't control within their pattern structured lineal unfolding in time of their script. And that's who we are. That's what we are. And that's what we're doing here in waking up and watching the movie on both sides. Isn't that interesting? There's the comfort and technology path.
Hmm.
There's the fear and control path. We see that in the bifurcation now, and we can see how it's playing out and essentially do what we have to do, being in the matrix, but not of it, understanding really where this is going.
Exactly. It is very sophisticated.
Oh, to say the least. It's quite extraordinary in
Hmm.
its complexity of sophistication and its expectation that no true seeing, knowing, intelligent being who has integrated him or herself into the embodiment of being one's true and authentic self, more and more embodied in this living system, the living library of our genetics, the living library of what the genetics is in terms of a true organic computer, for lack of better term, that is conversant, interconnected with the whole of the cosmos and the universe, and returns to home or center and basically reclaim everything that we are. Because when contract makes a law, we have the full power of both acceptance of the law or the contract, and we have the power of rescission of our signature that has been attached to every contract. So in the regular legal system, and what we teach in Pantera and in our processes of education and status correction and so forth, there's fundamentals, the power of acceptance, that rather than polarizing with what they send at us through their legal and monetary mechanisms, we have the power to accept it. And I won't go into more detail as far as how the law mechanics work, but when you accept it, you're fully um, accepting the equitable interest, which in creational terms basically is the expression of who we are as creational beings. That what the legal system has been set up is to put us into a containment of a controlled estate, whereas the larger whole of our being and everything we've created through our capacities is an equitable estate. But in legal terms, we abandoned it. So
Hmm.
um, when you abandon something, then they go into their maritime law. And in maritime law, there's a principle called salvage and claim. You know, this is why we've heard since we were little this thing about the captain always goes down with the ship, because the captain is the authority through the maritime rules and the Admiralty office back in London, that that the captain holds the equitable interest of the vessel, the cargo, the crew, and the ship itself. And if the captain abandons ship, then that ship is subject to the rules of abandonment, the rules of salvage, and the rules of claim. So we have abandoned our own, um, I won't use the words vessel or ship, those are maritime terms, but we've abandoned our true equitable estate. And that's done by the way the system is constructed from the moment of birth, what happens with the mother and the registration of the birth and what a lot of people call the birth certificate, but it's much more layered and complex than just saying, oh, it's just the birth certificate. But
Mhm.
basically, it's a matter of equity and the matter of estates and the equitable beneficial interests of an estate. Well, our estate was abandoned by our parents. Our parents let go of their true right as lawful parents, biological and spiritually, and they became legal guardians. They became a guardian of the property that was pledged as collateral to uh, the franchise facility that creates the public debt, monetized debt, and all the rest of it. But we have the capacity to claim our estate, to reclaim it. And these are the steps we do in law and abiding by their legal system, but standing on what we know, both in terms of terrestrial law and in terms of universal law. So if the captain abandons the ship, it's subject to salvage and claim. Everything we've ever created in all of creation is contained within the equitable resonance of our biofield and our living library of our genetics. And if and when we abandon it and do not claim it, then the parasitic system, everything that we see here on the screen, can claim it. They can salvage it because we allowed the ship to go down, to go underwater, to be submerged under the waters of commerce, which basically means debt,
Mhm.
to be bonded to the debt or the monetary debt system, and to be recycled through the debt karma system of what we were just talking about, the reset, be
Mhm.
reset. So, you know, we're at the point where we need to basically claim our being, our equitable estate, and sever the attachments to the entanglements that will pull us over the falls of
Mhm.
Niagara back into the reset,
Mhm.
and to basically remove the presumption of consent, and that's the center path.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the neutral path. That's why what we talk about in Pantera is going to peace,
Mhm.
going to the resolution and integration of this binary coded system of the dark and the light. Going in, the only way out is in, but recognizing how much entanglement we've accepted and allowed through our course of time, and work in resolving and dissolving essentially the bonds that attach us to it. And that is the true path to returning home, to
Mhm.
call it the exit strategy from the
Mhm.
matrix. Um, and then and this was posted in one of our chats by one of our members last week. So, so this is the other one. This member posted these two from the same people at Ether Vault. The sigil of Baphomet, or the synthesis, the CEOs, corporate heads of state, heads of corporate bodies, the unified field, the unification of the dark and the light into a false illusion of wholeness that basically takes the two sides that we looked at in the other panel. While Enki, which is the Luciferian path of light, and Enlil, which is the satanic path of the dark, are the primary brothers in charge, creating a charge and discharge of the electrical circuitry that basically continues to keep us in their legal extraction system. The other symbols represent the subdepartments and security protocols of the simulation. The Baphomet is the ultimate symbol of the simulation. Basically, you have the gold bathed in golden light, the goat head, the two horns, basically the pentagram, the 5 points, the inverted feminine, and sitting on the head, and having this, um, you know, very robust male body with two arms sitting on the two pillars, the pillars of the king and the priest, controlling the land and the law. And these are the fasciae. You can see the ligatures and the the rods that are held by the fasciae, and basically controlling both into the middle. And so it's bathed in the golden light. This
Mhm.
one is the more demonic or diabolic image. You still have the two pillars right here, and you can see sort of this smoke coming up here. And you've got the symbol of the, you know, the the three fingers on the right hand going up and then the left hand going down. And you've got the two snakes and the control of the spine and the seven chakras and the more demonic looking figure and the wings and basically the red cloth.
So the
Oh,
hand symbols would be as above, so below, wouldn't it?
yeah, right.
Mhm.
As in heaven, so in
Yeah,
earth.
yeah.
Mhm. What it represents a union of opposites, solve e coagula, basically dissolve and coagulate. So dissolve is the settling or the dissolution of the projection into the matrix, and the coagula or the coagulation is the reforming into the new heaven, the new earth. It represents the matrix itself, the blending of male and female, animal and human, spirit and matter. But it's not a true balanced blending. It's a fusion that basically dissolves the true principles of the masculine and the feminine principle. And basically, the masculine principle is the principle of directive will, having the capacity to direct our will and utilizing our land based systems, physical, emotional, and mental, to be able to formulate in the mind our creational intention through will, and then to energize it through our source connection in the heart and ground it into the physical substrate of the planetary body. And then, you know, it's perverting the animal and saying that the human is nothing but an animal, and perverting the true nature of the animal domain, and certainly debasing the human, and basically doing the transhumanistic fusion of spirit and matter.
Mhm.
The faction. This is the Anu Council signature. It represents the appearance of a unified front where Enki's technology, light technology, and Enlil's laws, the draconian law of the priest and the priesthood and the Godhead and the Yahweh system, they meet together to create the 3D containment. And going back to Enlil and the Sumerian, Enlil had two totems, two basic power elements, and one was the web or the net,
Mhm.
the other was the bow. And in Revelation, when the white horse comes in, the rider on the white horse is carrying a bow. Well, that goes back to Apollo, who was the sun god, which is really another expression of Enlil as the power point, and Enki as the sun or the son of God, and the sun itself, the solar logos. But Apollo had his totem or his power tool was the bow, and the arrow was that he shot. The arrows he shot with his wife Corona, and their daughter were dipped in the poison pool of their daughter, who was known as Pharmakia, and that is the word in Greek for sorcery or illusion or black magic. And that's where pharmacia or pharmacology and pharmaceuticals, where that derives from. And so, what is the actual arrow of the bow? What is the bow being carried by the rider on the pale horse or the white horse in the book of Revelation? It's a hypodermic needle,
Mhm.
okay, which is going to inject their patented corporate technology and their CRISPR technology, which goes into the DNA, can cut it and insert a false insert called an mRNA molecule to basically turn the human being into a controlled blending male, female, transgender, animal, human, spirit, matter, transhumanistic, Borg. cell, a
Mhm.
cell in the body of this Borg system.
Yeah.
And so, um, and basically, you can see in Enlil the laws, the law of the priests, and in Enki the Luciferian light. It's basically the crown or the so-called divine right of kings to bring forward the technology, whether it's monetary technology, medical technology, legal technology, or you know,
Mhm.
systems technology.
Yeah,
Um,
it's going to be something that will seduce you
right,
into taking it, wanting to take it like a perk, right? Like they say, the anti-aging, oh, or the medical beds that they're, talking about, which in truth they would never really truly release. But yeah, it'll always be a carrot.
right. But it's always by consent, even though they
Hmm.
say their rules are mandatory. It's always by consent.
Yeah.
Um, and which reminds me of a story. In my path over the last 35 years, I always get little clues that open things up for me and give me real insight into how the law works and all the substrates of the legal and monetary system. So some time ago, um, I forget exactly when, 15 years ago, there was talk of the United States renewing mandatory drafting
Mm.
into the military. And I read this guy on some chat or somewhere just passed by my screen. It was very interesting. This guy told this story of during the Vietnam era in the 70s when they had the draft and everybody thought it was mandatory. If you got drafted, if your number came up, you had no choice unless you wanted to run up to Canada or go
Hmm.
to jail or try to be a conscientious objector. But this man said that, well, no, I properly, went down to the enrollment center and said, okay, my number's up here, I'm reporting. And he went through all the steps and he,
Oh.
signs in, does all that stuff. And then the first day he goes into the beginning of boot camp. And there's a drill sergeant who's this screaming, hissing, spitting,
Hmm.
you know, monster of a man who's yelling at them and trying to break their spirit to become good soldiers, to go kill and be killed and all of that. And at the very end of the first introduction, the sergeant had them line up in a line,
Hmm.
and the sergeant's in front of them, and the sergeant yells, "Okay, who's ready to join this army?" There's the offer of contract
Hmm.
to voluntarily consent to join the army when everybody's there thinking, okay, well, I'm here, I've been drafted, I have to join the army. And he said that everybody stepped forward. When you step forward, you have voluntarily moved your body to
Yeah.
accept the contract. Who's ready to join this army? And
Hmm.
he was the only one who did not do that. And he stood his ground on that line. And of course, the sergeant came up nose to nose and was yelling and screaming, "What kind of pussy are you?" And,
Yeah.
and other words that we won't put onto this recording, but just yelling and screaming like for 10 minutes, "You come forward,
Yeah.
you join this army." And he refused.
Yeah.
And then the sergeant just let it go and said, "Okay, you're dismissed." And he literally walked away.
Brilliant.
So he put this out on the internet, whenever that was, and said, "Young men, you do not have to comply. It's a matter of voluntary consent." And when you look at the IRS system, it's the same thing. And you look at all of the contracts, it's
Hmm.
all the same thing. And if you blow it up to the largest scale of the contractual consent to the matrix, to everything here,
Hmm.
basically, well, we'll give you a choice. You're going to be in the matrix either way. You can go the light path or the dark path. Which would you like?
Hmm.
Okay. But either way, you do volunteer to do that. So our process of status correction goes into the depths of that. We do the legal and lawful elements of it and the steps, but also into the ultimately the true universal level of sovereign free will, the nature of contract, the nature of everything about being in this containment field, who and what we really are, as you and I have talked about our last three sessions, and what the nature of consent or rescission of that consent and the severing of the presumption of that consent. So it's a 3D containment or
Mhm.
container. The goal is to keep the soul spark in a state of perpetual duality so it never finds the middle path to the exit.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, just thinking about certain aspects, like they make you believe that you have to pay land taxes. So if you buy your home and you think you bought your home, but you don't really own your home, that's the whole illusion too. Then you have to pay land taxes. Then there's also the taxes. It's just like in every aspect, it's it's containing. It's containment in every aspect. They're doing the same thing as in that military experience of that man speaking.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But it goes very deep because of the acceptance, starting first with the abandonment of the estate by the parents. They become legal guardians. That sets up in law what's called a guardian ward relationship, the state being the guardian, the ward being the the foundling of the newborn true embodied being who then becomes under a legal guardianship of what used to be the lawful parents, now the legal guardians, and then what the choice of making a choice to continue that guardian ward relationship at your date of your majority age, your 18th birthday, which almost everybody does because they're not educated or told, well, you have a choice. And then everything you do from that point, we're basically contracting and recontracting and reaffirming our contract over and over again, dozens of times every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time it comes to buying a piece of land or property, that we're just simply the authorized signatory to put up a juristic person who has a credit-worthy standing to bring Federal Reserve notes or Canadian dollars or whatever it is, along with the signature that brings forward the private equity in the underlying estate to attach to the title.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this thing called title insurance. And then when you insure something, basically you hypothecate the value of that substance of value, whether it's a body when you have life insurance, whether it's a car when you have car insurance, or whether it's a title to property when you have title insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And that just puts it right into the whole debt monetization system and all the rest of it. And then I don't know what it's like in Canada as far as the documentation, but the documentation here in the States, I'm sure it's a variation on the same theme in Canada and pretty much everywhere, um, is that you're a tenant, you know, you're a
Right.
tenant.
Yeah.
And then so and the word tenant goes back to something called the Cestui Que Vie Acts. And the first Cestui Que Vie Act was done in 1540 by Henry VIII. And the Cestui Que Vie Act of 1540 gave administrators of estates the right to claim past rents and tenements. So this is where you come into basically, being a landless peasant or a serf lifted off the land, put into the containment field, bound by the laws of the priest and all the rest of it. And then you go to 1666, the next KV Act, which has to do being lost at sea and basically losing control of the estate.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's interesting right now, up in your neck of the woods
Mm-hmm.
or woods of the neck, is recently where this whole thing about the Canadian government giving giving the land authority
Oh, yeah.
back to the tribes,
Mhm.
and basically the whole thing about what's going to happen to all of these people who have, you know, statutory title in the construct that I just described, when they no longer have any claim. Okay.
Mhm.
Of course, it gets more complex, and I don't want to go into, that particular thing, but for people watching who aren't familiar with it, Lauda is in British Columbia, um,
Mhm.
and so recently the Canadian government basically agreed on a settlement of a lawsuit to return the title, not the title, but the to remove basically the claim of the overlay of the titled system, and the true standing of the original people who have an original genetic resonance with that location on the physical
Mhm.
land of the earth body, that they're actually relinquishing that. And of course, there's all kinds of other legal title issues, that people own homes and think they own their
Mhm.
property and their land. That's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
other story. But that is a very interesting event,
Mhm.
um, which indicates that there are other things happening besides what I just showed in those two panels,
Mhm.
besides the light path and the dark path, and the good cup, bad cup, good God, bad God of
Mhm.
Enki and Enlil, and what is basically being made available because of the implosion and the collapsing of this binary system,
Mhm.
which is, besides the script being fully deployed now, totally visible in the movie theater,
Mhm.
which we can talk about in a moment, there is something else going on,
Mhm.
which has to do with the work that so many real beings who have primary creator standing on this world, in this world, contractual relationship, because
Mhm.
our contract with the living being that we call this planet or the earth is a superseding contract to all the other illusory contracts.
Mhm.
So we have the right to claim that, reclaim that, to activate, because
Mhm.
it's been dormant, our primary standing and our contractual co-creational relationship with the being who is the living mother, the earth.
Mhm. Yeah.
And when we do that, all else will fall away. And that's what we also see happening as they're playing out their book of Revelation and their last hurrah.
Mhm. I mean, it is a very interesting precedent in the sense that really, if you want to look at it that way, all of North America is theirs, not just a section of British Columbia.
Right, of course. Yeah.
So there is no such thing as crown land if you're going to go there. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, the crown is a false corona, the corona of
mm-hmm.
the sun, which is Apollo's consort,
Yep.
corona, out of which they have a progeny or a spawn
Mm-hmm.
in the form of Pharmakia, who has the poison well of the poison that they've been trying to get us to imbibe and put into our bodies, whether
Yeah.
it's by the arrow of the bow, or it's the chemtrails or all the degraded food and soils and everything, to lower our vibrational capacity so that we can't see above the threshold of the mass hallucination consensus reality.
Yeah.
But enough of us have moved through that and are
Mm-hmm.
healing our bodies, healing our emotional body, healing our psyche, healing our trauma, and so forth, that we are uh, able to see above that polarized construct.
Hallucination. Yeah.
And that's withdrawing at an exponentially expanding rate,
Mm-hmm.
the energetic attachment to our source connection.
Mm-hmm.
They are losing the ability to parasitically feed off the host. We
Mm-hmm.
volunteered to be the host so that we could force in a way the outpicturing of all of this and the true agenda, so enough people would start waking up and really seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now snowballing, and they can't stop it. They already know they
Yeah.
can't stop it. And so what we just showed on those two panels, the light path, the dark path, is simply just to awaken our memory and of reality, that
Mm-hmm.
that's where we've been stuck for eons of chronological time under a Saturnian Godspell and all the rest of it, but it's not real. It's
Hmm.
two-dimensional, just like the movie that plays on the screen is two-dimensional, looks real, feels real, it engenders fear or emotion or
Hmm.
all these things. But we can actually just stand up and walk out of the theater and walk back into reality, and that's what we're doing.
Hmm. I mean, and so which leads us into what, the geopolitical situation, and also in terms of what's happening here, which we were discussing, I've wondered because when you think of the polarity and the duality and Enki and Enlil and that entire thing, and you think of what's happening with the land and the native, I also think, well, what's the objective here? What is the bottom line? What's working underneath this all to give the illusion of this? Because is this also part of a setup that
Mhm.
is advantageous to this agenda, this duality agenda? Because
So
it
what is
isn't
it?
benevolent.
Yeah, but what are you referring to? This thing about the native
Yeah,
lands?
yeah, as an example.
Well, it's just another way of creating the polarity between, well, it's the natives who it's their land, who are the
Hmm.
natives, well, the indigenous original people on the land. So then what happens to all the immigrants who came in who have actual real standing and
Hmm.
capacity and presence on the land? I was born on the land of California.
Yeah.
You were born on the land of Spain, but then you came
Hmm.
to Canada.
Hmm.
Um, so who really is native? Well, who's really native is the original um, prime creators of our with our original contract with the earth that we came into this creational field that was essentially unmanifest, and we brought the living library of our eternal presence into this creational field in and entered, engaged into a contract of co-creation with
Hmm.
the mother, the earth principle, the living being, and created this you know vast expression of life in
Hmm.
millions, billions, and maybe trillions of expressions with
Hmm.
so-called species
Yeah.
and all the rest of that. That is the original contractual creational expression of this realm, or not
Hmm.
realm, of this earth, this living being. Okay, what came in after was a penetration and infiltration and a basically a illegal immigration, which see we're seeing it playing out now in what's happening. It's all this stuff of
Hmm.
illegal immigrants, you
Hmm.
know, coming in, claiming, and they've been set up to be um, basically the dispossessed, the disenfranchised, the ones who don't have the bennies of the physical reality that the first world has,
Hmm.
Europe and North America. Um, and so you have this illegal immigration. Well, that's just a metaphor on the movie screen of beings who came into this um, primary creation
Hmm.
illegally because they didn't have a contract with the earth. They had a provisional contract with we as the prime creator beings,
Hmm.
which we talked about the last two times.
Hmm.
We talked about the treaty that Andrew and I awakened to in 1999 and how that progressed in our unveiling and
Hmm.
integration of um, conscious awareness of it over the last 25, 26 years, that the original thought we had in 1999 was that we had to sneak in here. They were controlling, and we had to
Hmm.
sneak in under the radar and take on the clothing of the realm and then, shift it,
Hmm.
embody it. No, it was the other way around. The parasite had destroyed its worlds before.
Hmm.
And I mentioned,
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, who, when the first atomic bomb, the splitting of the physical construct of the atom took place, he quoted Shiva, "Yea, I become destroyer of worlds." Well, that's who they are. And
Hmm.
he was just re-expressing it, you know.
Hmm.
And so they're destroyer of worlds.
Hmm.
And we gave him one last opportunity to resolve and rectify and to face their karmic responsibility. And instead, they just tried to do it again.
Mhm.
No, we're the gods. We're God. You're just the minions when it's the other way around. So at this point, we're at the end point. We're at
Mhm.
the the closure of accounts where every being has to face themselves and has to accept responsibility of their karmic, um,
Mhm.
responsibility. So, so they continually create polarity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And now everything in the States and elsewhere is about race,
Mhm.
racist. Well, you're a racist,
Mhm.
but they just turned the brown and the black and the other colored skin suits into being the superior races, and so now the
Mhm.
whites are to be
Mhm.
degraded, and that's part of their agenda too. Because the white race, the white genetics was used to outpicture the world system.
Yeah.
And that's what the white races did
Mhm.
through, global colonialism and resource extraction and all the rest of it. But
Mhm.
then they flipped it so that
Mhm.
the black and brown and yellow and red races, then they boost them up to be the
Mhm.
dominators. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing with this is native land.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what is native land? Well, I'm a native to this creational field
Mhm.
by the principle of my primary relationship with the living being and the mother,
Mhm.
as are you, as
Mhm.
are the beings that you've referred to for a long time as prime creators or the prime beings or the real beings.
Mhm.
Um, Most people uh, are basically hybrids.
Mhm.
And the wars that we see on the external screen are nothing but the externalized projection of the inner war between these disharmonious genetics that cannot harmonize because the dominator component of the genetics, that is the parasite,
Mhm.
cannot come to resolution to co-create and live in harmony with life and all
Yeah.
beings. It still wants to control and dominate.
Mhm.
So people individually are going through their inner wars between the hybridization of the
Mhm.
genetics and the ancestral line through rape and pillage and everything that's happened. And that's the real work right now,
Mhm.
because um, because if you want to call it the divine
Mhm.
dispensation, is that all accounts are being settled now.
Mhm.
And so you can settle your account, and there's mechanisms in law and the legal
Mhm.
system, monetary system, where you can basically reclaim the estate and out of the equitable interests of the state, settle all claims and liabilities that were bonded to us through the old system. The old
Mhm.
system is done now. They're
Mhm.
going into the new system. They're trying to take it into the Agenda 47, the smart cities and the AI
Mhm.
protocols and the digital reality, but we can still use that. We do not have to be at the effect of that. We can be at the causal directive
Mhm.
um, position of that. But how do we achieve that? We reclaim our estate, we reclaim our directive principle, the true masculine of our will, truly balance with the feminine principle, which is the
Mhm.
regenerative. That life, true life, is always regenerative. It's not a death
Mhm.
path, it's not a death cult. The true feminine is a regenerative principle of eternal living systems, living
Mhm.
presence.
It is it is very it is very loaded. It's going into a really deep rabbit hole because everything is based on mitochondria, really. At the heart of it all, it's all DNA.
Mhm.
And what we're witnessing in one way or another is an attack on DNA. The resets are an attack on DNA. Everything is.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And what is the mitochondria? It's basically the original template of the mother, the living principle,
yeah.
because it passes through the
Hmm.
female. But what is the female? What is a female body versus a male body, and why did that happen in terms of splitting the true whole being
Mm-hmm.
that was a integrated whole being of both the masculine and the
Yeah.
feminine without these physical characteristics of a
Mm-hmm.
male body or a female body. Well, in genetics, it's the basics is the Y chromosome and the X chromosome, and basically the Y is simply the breaking of the rib or the ribosome,
Mm-hmm.
the RNA of the mother mitochondria
Mm-hmm.
to break it off. And if we just look at the letter in the
Mm-hmm.
English language of a Y is a pillar that's been split.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you look at the tetragrammaton of Yahweh, YHWH or VH double V. It's a Y.
Mm-hmm.
So the overlay of the broken off um, true mother principle of the female or feminine mitochondria that created the Y chromosome,
Mm-hmm.
which is the split male, which is the good male, the bad male,
Yeah.
the Enki and the Enlil, and like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that Y and you attach it to HVH. Well, HVH basically is the word heaven. It's the word even. It's the Hebrew word hava, which is the Hebrew for Eve
Mm-hmm.
or the original feminine. So you have this patriarchal system implanting this pillar
Mm-hmm.
that's a split male, split masculine that creates a polarization in the binary code of the
Yeah.
genet of the computer digital structure onto the feminine. Then you create this whole reverse consciousness of the patriarchy and the father and the
Mm-hmm.
father and the son and the male ghost and
Mm-hmm.
all the rest of it. When in actual fact, that's not the origin of our initial primary relationship with life in this
Mm-hmm.
mother principle in the creational field that manifested in what we created as this living, extraordinary system. And um, so that's where the primal split
Mm-hmm.
and the genetics, which basically we're reliving again right now,
Mm-hmm.
with the CRISPR technology to
Yep.
open it up, insert a
Yep.
corporate patented corporation, copyright patented right to own that which it's inserted in,
Mm-hmm.
an attempt to claim the genetics in the living bodies and then force them by contractual necessity or mandatory
Mm-hmm.
um, compulsion into where they want to take us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're right at, we're in the barrel going over the Niagara Falls, and our wakening up is, hey, I can bring my life force back into this physical embodiment, and I can turn this barrel into a motorboat and put it back upstream and not go over the falls. Because
Mm-hmm.
once we go over the falls, it's the inevitability of the
Mm-hmm.
recapture, recontracting into the loop, the collapse, and back to the reset.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes me whenever you say the word Niagara Falls and the barrel, it reminds me that there was only one woman who ever survived that, who went
Hmm.
into the barrel, I think it was in the 1800s or the late 1800s, with a cat.
Hmm.
And she's the only one that survived it. It just makes me think that. I just was freaked out about her bringing her cat with, I was like, "Oh my God, that's so awful."
Hmm.
They survived. So, but again, that's an anomaly, right? which
Yeah.
which is what that's what we are. We're the anomaly.
Hmm.
We're the paradox. We're the glitch in the matrix
Right.
and the
Yep.
virus. So, okay, that takes us to the geopolitical situation we're in today,
Hmm.
in the year of the fire horse, which, basically starts with a bang. You want to talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Sure. Well, why don't you take it up first? What do you see as it starting with a bang?
Well, what I see is like now you've got the media talking about Greenland, an interest in taking Greenland, which, is very interesting. You've got the situation in Iran, with the people wanting to be set free. And apparently, according to the media, it's terrible what's happening and how many people they're killing. Um, or I shouldn't say that word on YT, deleting. Um,
Disembodied.
yeah, you've got like the Venezuela stuff going on. Uh, it's you know it's a real uptick in the agenda. You've got the old maps that talk about, the agenda of taking over the US taking over all of these areas as though it's a done deal, right? So what's really going on? What is the geopolitical situation in relationship to this whole thing? Because we are seeing this bifurcation. We are seeing, you know, the bifurcation is more like those two are still commingling together.
Mhm. Um, well, I've mentioned before in our talks, this man named Martin Vreeland, who's Dutch. Do you remember that mentioning it?
Mhm.
Have you ever looked at anything of his?
Yeah, I did after we did that video.
Okay. So, but summing it up, he basically, both from his 3D reality experience, knowledge and life experience and stuff, but his obviously multidimensional awakening process, remembering things. He basically um, talks about essentially what we have been talking about here in
Mhm.
this session and before, um, the the cyclical nature of the loop and the recycling, reset, and so forth. And he speaks of it in terms of and others that we've looked at over the last couple of years, and basically our own intuitive knowing for the
Mhm.
last 10 to 20 years, coming to seeing it more and more clear and precise. And each one of us have a big piece of the puzzle,
Mhm.
and then when you bring your piece forward, and then I bring my piece, Martin brings his piece, other people, then none of us, from my point of view, can
Mhm.
contain the whole
Yep.
of the whole picture. We couldn't do that in
Yep.
holding our individual piece through the darkness of the
Mhm.
subterranean journey through time. So he has his piece, and that helped clarify certain key things for me. That the precise um, element of the what he described as the last snip of the original um, true timeline that
Mhm.
basically was hijacked, perverted, subverted by this being who we now call Lucifer,
Mhm.
that basically was the embodying being or spirit of what we call the Saturnian body.
Right.
And then there was a insert or an intrusion of what in biology would call an exosome. An exosome is what people in medical terms call a virus, but the virus doesn't come from outside, it comes from the cells, where the cell or the body's wisdom knows there's a toxin or something not right in the body. So it creates exosomes, which means bodies outside coming out of the cell to proliferate, to basically consume the toxicity or the invading body that doesn't belong inside the body. And so there was an exosome event that basically came into this larger creational field that
Mhm.
included what we call the solar system,
Mhm.
and basically caused this um, cataclysmic event
Mhm.
that basically collapsed the what I would call now the higher dimensional frequency of this of what we created before it collapsed into 3D density. And that caused basically the infiltration of the parasite, the consciousness that basically was disconnected from source, and it took over the collective body. The
Mhm.
result of that is this Luciferian body was able to capture the last, again, if you see a movie,
Mhm.
in an old reel, film reel,
Mhm.
and at the very end, you got this whole film running through the projector. And at the very end, the last 2 minutes of the movie, is when everything that was the end of the original timeline that got collapsed
Mhm.
and infiltrated. And this Luciferian being of a higher dimensional capacity was able to take the snip of those last, say, 2 minutes of that film strip,
Mhm.
and then basically, as we collapse into this 3D containment and the larger body of the real Earth, the
Mhm.
whole bigger Earth that we're just a little
Mhm.
crater inside of,
Yeah.
he basically could contain through electromagnetic fields, create the firmament and the layered seven heavens and all the
Mhm.
mathematics and all the AI, new heavens,
Mhm.
new earths, and everything like that. And so basically, the strip, the last few minutes of that strip of the original timeline before it collapsed and got truncated and we got cut off from it, that's the loop that we keep on playing
Mhm.
out.
Mhm.
Okay, we keep repeating it.
Yeah.
So it's a known script. And then the beings that are called the Anunnaki or the
Mhm.
gods, and then the middle management team,
Mhm.
which is called the Elites, El as in Saturn, El Elyon, the
Mhm.
highest of the high. El eats. What does he eat? He eats and consumes the creational expression of the source connected beings and their life force. And so it's all about this,
Mhm.
big buffet that El is eating. That's why they call him the El eats. And basically the head or the thinking
Mhm.
the motherboard of the computer of that is called the Isra elites. So
Mhm.
the Israelites basically is for Isis, which is the queen of the stars,
Mhm.
not the queen of the heavens, the queen of the stars, and Ra, who's the one who rides the boat or the bark
Mhm.
across the heavens, and basically is the overarching God of the Father that bursts the Sun, and what we call the solar system. And it's a solar system, so it's a capture system of all the souls of the
Mhm.
beings who got trapped in that collapse
Mhm.
of what happened when that exosome, which I feel is what was inserted to basically um, destroy the ultimate um, lockdown and collapse into the infinitely recycling parasitic system.
Mhm.
So eternity said, okay, we see where that's going. We have to create this exosome to come in and create the viral um, uh, body that's going to eventually cause the parasite to self cannibalize and destroy itself to heal the body and return us to the original timeline.
Mhm.
Okay. So,
Mhm.
and then out of that comes all the things, the Chronos, Saturn,
Mhm.
Zeus, Jupiter, all the gods, and
Mhm.
so on and so forth. So, in the book of Revelation, which basically comes from the Greek Sibylline seers is the female um, initiates who were part of the oracles and all the
Mhm.
rest of it. They brought forward what now then got rewritten by the Romans and those who created the New Testament, and that became the book of Revelation. But if you look at the book of Revelation, which includes the beginning that I talked about, the rider on the white horse with the
Mhm.
bow who's going to come in and, you know, create the hypodermic needle and the
Mm-hmm.
poison pharmakia. Um, but if you read into the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 19, pretty sure it is, it talks about the birds of God or of Yahweh coming into the feast, which is going to feast on all flesh. It's going to consume all flesh. And basically, no matter what, kings,
Mm-hmm.
queens, normal people, regular people, scientists, whatever, all flesh will be consumed by the birds, which is basically the elite and the
Mm-hmm.
disincarnate beings who work through the elite to basically consume the flesh, capture
Mm-hmm.
the souls, and do the recycling or the collapse and the reset. So Martin Vreeland's work is very significant in adding a key component of the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in his work, he wrote a book called The Trump Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of that last strip of the film, that Lucifer, the Luciferian being, was able to snip and capture in sort of a loop of a, repetitive recording and movie, there's always a Messiah figure.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at like basically the rabbinical Jews who are coming from the Talmudic,
Mm-hmm.
the Babylonian Talmud, that basically says they're the superior ones. They are the elite who would
Mm-hmm.
take over the world for their God, which is Yahweh or Saturn and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to consume the flesh. They
Mm-hmm.
will get to, you know, and then there's chapter and towards the end of Leviticus where it basically says, if you just paraphrasing, it essentially says, Yahweh said to the Israelites, if you don't bend the knee and absolutely bend down to me and worship and follow me, this is Enlil with the iron
Mm-hmm.
cage. You must follow my law to the letter of it and do exactly what I say. And if you don't, then you're basically, excommunicated, and I will cause you to eat your children, eat your sons and daughters. See, I never read the Bible. I
Oh,
was
oh,
I was born
oh.
into a Jewish family, and but I never was at all inculcated into the Jewish religion. But I was in the Jewish culture in Los Angeles. Of course, I didn't grow up Christian, but in my pursuit of root knowledge and so forth, I've studied religion and all the roots in the esoterica for 5 to 6 decades,
Yeah.
but I never read the Bible until actually recently. I've always tried, like for decades, I said, I'm going to read the Bible front to
Mm-hmm.
back. And I get into the first, two books and I go, this is so boring. It's so stupid. I'm sorry to say for those of you who believe in it, but it really is. It's so sophomoric. It's so two-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the first 5 books um, that become the Torah
Mm-hmm.
as the Old Testament for the Jewish foundations, basically tells you quite a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
So not too long ago, a couple of years ago, I finally got to the point where I could read the 5 books,
Mm-hmm.
first 5 books. I still want to go through the rest of the Old Testament, and but I've picked up many, many key
Mm-hmm.
pieces and clues of the highlights of what really we need to know about the symbols and the hidden meanings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but in Leviticus at the end, it has that I will, if you do not bend the knee, I will cause you to eat the flesh of your sons and daughters. So what do we see happening now? We see basically aborted fetuses being ground into McDonald's hamburgers. You got the masses basically eating the flesh of their aborted, um, preborn beans and stuff like that. Quite horrific, but
Mm-hmm.
basically, when you do that, when you eat that kind of substance, it starts integrating and hybridizing with the genetics and the
Yep.
cellular structure and all the rest of it. So then you start getting pulled back into the illusions of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go to Revelations, So you got the first 5 books of the Torah on the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
be reset, and then you got Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And one thing I just learned not too long ago, we have a new member of Pantera who's quite an extraordinary man, and I'm going to interview him soon.
Mhm.
I'm going to put it up on Freedom Absolute. Should happen in the next couple of weeks. But he was an avid Christian growing up, and suffice to say, he broke free of that and started really breaking down and so forth. Well, he's written um, a book, a novel, which is very good for a first novel author,
Mhm.
really good. And basically, it's a revelation of the things that he had revealed to him and opened up. And I won't give away the whole story, but I have to tell you this, which kind of gives away a big part of it, which is essentially the story of the novel is these theological students go to this island. The island is called AI or I,
Mhm.
and it's got this theological college on the surface of the island, but it's got this satanic underpinning by the ones who control the island. It's a
Mhm.
metaphor, obviously.
Mhm.
And the book's called AI colon the opening. So it's the opening of this revelation. But what he points to is that in the book of Numbers is basically the census and the numerical calculation of the controlled population to create in tens and hundreds and thousands the decimal system, which is the mechanism of the Romans to decimate. Um, that in Numbers, it's basically a counting of the 12 tribes, which of course is the 12 zodiacal houses,
Yeah.
and and other things that at one point in Numbers in chapter 31, so the number 31 is very significant,
Mhm.
that that basically it's the when the Israelites go to war with the Moabites and the I think Mennonites, and it has to do with Jacob and his father-in-law and all that kind of stuff. But basically, the Israelites win and they kill all the men and the boys and
Mhm.
older women, and they capture the virgins, and then they divvy up the spoils of the virgins, and basically they give Yahweh his portion, which is 32 virgins. And then he refers to the Talmud, which is the Babylonian rabbinical esoteric teachings that underpin the Talmud and the five books. And basically it's there in black and white, basically that it God, Yahweh, gives authority to the priests to divide the spoils, and that the priests get to keep the virgins under 3 years old. So one day less than 3 years, and then the soldiers and the other levels of the social structure get to keep the virgins one day older than 3 years, maybe 3 years to whatever, 8 or 10 years, and they marry them. And the way they marry them is through intercourse. So here's the root of your pedophilia,
Mhm.
your sacrificial, virgins being sacrificed to Yahweh. And Yahweh, in his portion, he gets to keep 32 of them. So 32 of those virgins who will be married to Yahweh through intercourse, and the priests who get to have the ones below 3 years old, and then the other ones above 3 years old. Here's your root of everything that's being exposed today: the
Mhm.
pedophilia, the child sacrifice, the absolute abomination of the pure innocence of the
Mhm.
female child that has been put on the altar to become a burnt offering,
Mhm.
and all the rest of it. And if you read the first five books of uh, the
Mhm.
Testament, it's just full of that. It's just,
Mhm.
the sweet, savory smell of the burnt offering of the blood that was pleasing to Yahweh,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And this is the God that many people
Yep.
still are attached to,
Yep.
and they don't see it. All they see is the shining light
Mhm.
of the Savior, the Christ principle, which goes back to the sun
Mhm.
God, and Ra and Is, who is this the stars. Isis was the queen of the stars, not the queen of the heavens. So
Yeah.
the stars are below the firmament containment field of the dome,
Yeah.
but heaven is above the which is basically Jupiter,
Hmm.
which is also known, I mean, not Jupiter,
It's a
Uranus. It's
yeah.
Uranus.
Hmm.
And Uranus comes from the queen of the heavens in Egypt, who is known as Urania.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so, so basically, you have the true universal creation
Hmm.
that we're separated from
Yeah.
by the vault of the seventh heaven, who is Saturn, the Chronos, or the
Hmm.
god of time,
Hmm.
who is known as El Elyon or El Shaddai, who's the god of the mountain.
Hmm.
And what is the mountain? The mountain is the center point of this body that we're in, which is not a globe.
Hmm.
It's not a flat Earth per se. It's a crater on the larger body of the larger original Earth that was basically scorched by the process that Martin Vreeland brought forward and brings forward. And you can look at all the old maps, and
Hmm.
there is the four rivers in the center, which is known as Mount Meru.
Hmm.
Okay, and so what? Where does Mount Meru placed relative to Greenland? Okay, so this
It's right
gets
above it.
this is why you asked the question
Hmm.
about Greenland. I had to go through this whole
Yeah. Yeah.
story to bring us back to Greenland. And why Greenland? Well, so Trump is basically the embodiment of the Enki principle, the Luciferian
Hmm.
prodigal son, the bringer of peace.
Hmm.
And but at the
Wink.
same time, he is essentially doing the bidding of Jerusalem, which is the overlaying of the Melchizedek
Yeah.
order that basically gave Jerusalem to Abraham. Jerusalem, in its original etymology, is Uru Shalem, or
Hmm.
founded on Shalem, which basically is the feminine principle. So it's the overlay of the mother, it's the control of the genetics, it's the breaking off of the ribosome and the RNA to truncate the X chromosome and turn it into the Y that became the Yahweh principle that attached itself to Hava, or the heaven, or the real feminine principle, the Eve principle.
Hmm.
And so, in his first term, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's bringing it back to that nodal point on the crater, which is at essentially 33 degrees longitude and 33 degrees latitude. So it's the X cross point of the maritime overlay, because when you talk about longitude and latitude, you're talking about a AI construct of a globe projected onto the crater under the seven-layered dome under the firmament
Hmm.
to contain everybody within the Isis false goddess, queen of the stars. And what are the stars? The stars are the reset of the pattern of the new heaven and the new earth
Hmm.
in this current cycle we're in,
Hmm.
that has inner dynamics of patterns of control
Hmm.
and simulation that we've been trained to worship
Hmm.
through new age principles like astrology and science through astronomy and all
Hmm.
the rest of it, and then everything about all of those systems.
Hmm.
So that's where is comes
Hmm.
from is Ra El.
Hmm.
And Ra, of course, is basically the a priori principle of the patriarchal Godhead.
Hmm.
And originally, Amen
Mm.
was what was it? Um,
Was that Amen Ra?
well, that was the secondary expression. Amen Ra, the name Amen
Hmm.
with Ra basically means the hidden one.
Hmm.
Okay, but there were oh no, I know it was the original one was Marduk,
Mm.
Marduk Ra, and Marduk is a there in the work of a man named Anton Parks, which I've mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
whose work is very important. And basically, he takes it back to there is no god named Marduk. There was
Mm-hmm.
a basically an office or a title holder called the Marduka, which basically is the keeper of the contract that enabled the Anunnaki or the Anuna to take the role of becoming, the gods and the ledgers of the basically the false ledger, the false um, um, Akashic records. Basically, the Marduka is the false Akashic records.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says, "Oh, the Akashic records and all
Mm-hmm.
that." That's a false construct of the AI computerized system. The
Yeah.
real record is the living library of living beings, and in our genetics, not just the
Mm-hmm.
mitochondrial genetics, but the call it the cosmic genetics. We
Yeah.
are a individuated expression of the whole with our unique living library of our eternal
Yeah.
presence throughout all of creation that has come into this
Mm-hmm.
temporal control system to and but the living library is
Mm-hmm.
still there. So our living library and our genetics is in co-resonance with the living library of the earth, which is basically held in the trees. Okay, so they take the living library of the earth, they cut them down, they throw them through
Mm-hmm.
the pulp mills, they turn them into paper, they put their law
Mm.
on these pieces of paper and call it binding contractual nexus. Essentially, that's the Marduka.
And
So
that's the
the
tree of
office,
life too.
yeah, well, they say, you can't have access to the tree of life. You can
Mm-hmm.
only, be stuck in the debased level of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and
Yeah.
evil, which is the polarity construct. You know,
Mm-hmm.
is it good or is it evil? Is it Enlil or Enki?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it Trump or,
Mm.
Putin? And so that's what the office of Marduk is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the so going back to the Garden of Eden is supposed to have four rivers,
Mm-hmm.
and there's four rivers in the delta coming up from the Giza Plateau in the Nile going north into the Mediterranean. It has four rivers. So you
Mm-hmm.
can say the Garden of Eden was in that area, but
Mm-hmm.
it repeats itself and it's a replication of the original umbilical entry point into the higher expression of creation through
Mm-hmm.
this planetary body in at Mount Meru. And so what I see going on is that as guided by the Israelites,
Mm-hmm.
elites, Israel and Jerusalem, the
Mm-hmm.
overlay of the feminine principle and all of that is a control of the mother um, source point, which is in the female mitochondria, which is passed on generationally,
Mm-hmm.
and we contain that. And so the umbilicus of the crater that we're in is
Mm-hmm.
Mount Meru, from which four rivers extend. You can see it in the old maps. There's four
Mm-hmm.
land bodies and there's four extended bodies of water.
Yeah.
And so what's playing out on the geopolitical screen right now is that the New World Order construction basically is the going from a unipolar control of the third crown
Mm-hmm.
of the triple crown of the Vatican, London, and DC. Now it's being rearranged so that there is um, a tripolar power structure or global or planetary hegemony, three
Mm-hmm.
points of power with local hegemons or control of a certain sector of hegemony within the crater.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be North and South America under the United States. So capturing Venezuela and all this stuff, which sounds great. Sounds
Mm-hmm.
great to me in terms of how I see the world geopolitical unfolding and everything that,
Mm-hmm.
Trump is empowering the United States and taking control of the Western Hemisphere. So it's always got that layer of it sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
But then you've got basically Russia and Turkey, Turkey being the Ottoman Empire,
Mm-hmm.
and Russia being basically the Rus Slavic Empire coming from the Slavic region of the Balkans,
Hmm.
which were basically the original slaves of Rome.
Hmm.
And basically that's where the word Slavic and slave come
Hmm.
together. And basically the Rus people were the northern migration of the Slavs. And so you've got the Rus Slavic center point that's basically poised to dissolve or disintegrate NATO and the EU,
Hmm.
all of which sounds great because obviously the EU is
Yep.
the Nazis and all of that,
Yep.
taking over that center point, basically linking up with the Ottoman Empire
Hmm.
renewed through Turkey that becomes the bridge between East and West. And
Hmm.
because the Venetian Empire, the oligarchs of Venice, the origins of banking that moved to the Netherlands and then moved to the city of London, created the banking
Hmm.
system. They basically worked through Constantinople, which is now called Istanbul, and worked east against west, and they made money in between both
Hmm.
sides. Okay,
Hmm.
so that's being renewed, and that will basically become the central hegemon between Turkey and Russia, controlling
Hmm.
Europe and down into Africa.
Hmm.
And then you have the Eastern, you got China and everything that China has become,
Hmm.
controlling Asia, the Asian Pacific,
Hmm.
the ASEAN countries of Southeast Asia, Japan, Korea, and everything down into the Pacific, into Australia,
Hmm.
and all of that. And that's your tripolar world of your new world order.
Hmm.
But there is also something emerging from beneath it, which is a true unified world based on all of the higher principles of a true republic, a true
Hmm.
balanced monetary expression, a true lawful system of justice and equity, and so
Hmm.
forth. And that's what we're bringing up. That's breaking through the up from the subconscious to the upper layers of the third dimensional conscious mind and breaking through so that we break it all up. And that's essentially what we're doing, because the Anuna, the gods that became the Anunnaki, they didn't come from outer space. They didn't come from the heavens. They came from the underworld. They came from the subconscious, which is the second dimension.
Hmm.
And they took on the form of the human form, basically merged with the technology of the AI system. And they, because of that superior technology during the beginning of new resets,
Hmm.
they appeared to be gods to the beings who at
Hmm.
once were living in a high civilization, worldwide civilization, but then collapsed, were reset, had the new heavens reset, and basically then saw these beings who started introducing, you know, writing and literature and
Hmm.
agriculture and political structure and all the rest of it, and they worshiped them as the gods.
Hmm.
So you have
Right.
this repeat. So it's our own subconscious that they co-opted.
Hmm.
If you look at the story of Osiris, and
Hmm.
he was the god of the underworld.
Hmm.
Basically, once he was basically the reincarnation of Enki, the Luciferian principle, who was killed by the dark principle or Enlil, who re-embodied as Set, and basically he was nailed to a tree, which is the crucified God,
Hmm.
and then he was delegated to the underworld.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And then all the souls who left the body had to travel and come up to his gateway, and the scales, the judicial scales, and the scales of Ma'at, and have their heart weighed against a feather. And if they were pure,
Hmm.
they were allowed to go their own way. If they were impure, meaning they had karmic attachments, monetary debt, bonding, and so forth through contractual relationships with the whole construct, they, by contractual obligation, were able to be recycled through the reincarnational cycle. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's the scales of Ma'at, which now are the scales of justice, or their
Hmm.
supposed justice.
Right.
So,
So then Mount Meru is of particular interest because it's related to the first access. gateway,
Um,
wouldn't it,
yeah,
to the heavens?
yeah. And I actually haven't really thought this through.
Hmm.
Everything I've been saying is sort of a
Hmm.
extemporaneous expression with everything I know in my inner being, plus things I've studied and how the puzzle fits together. Um, but if we look at the ice wall and the
Hmm.
containment, well, we've got this big body of water that's basically holds it's in, water is a crystalline form
Hmm.
of two gases that come together. And basically the emotional body and the subconscious is basically fluid and water. So then you have the overlay of the maritime rules of
Hmm.
their system, saying we're just vessels of commerce floating on the sea of commerce. And the minute we're born, the underlying estate is bonded with a certain amount of obligatory debt
Hmm.
to enable that newborn being as now a ward, a guardian ward of the corporate state to operate in commerce in the public system.
Hmm.
So we're born into sin, and sin is basically the baptismal ritual of putting us underwater. And
Hmm.
in terminology, regular monetary terminology, if you're in debt, you're underwater. So we're
Hmm.
born into debt. We're born into sin, and
Hmm.
sin is essentially the name of the moon goddess, Sin or Min or Mon, which we get money and Sin is one of the names of the moon goddess. The
Hmm.
moon god in Egypt was called Yah,
Hmm.
which is a derivative of Ea, and Ea is a derivative name of Enki. So Enki became Ea, became transliterated into Yah, who
Hmm.
became Yahweh. And so but we're born into sin
Hmm.
because we're born under the seas of commerce and we're baptized into the obligatory bondage of debt in the monetary system. And that's basically this huge body of water that's contained in this ice wall that is the perimeter of the electromagnetic field that holds us in the firmament and the seven layers of heaven and all of that. Um, so that's the second dimension. It's the dimension of our emotional body at its lower frequency.
Hmm.
It's the dimension of subconscious control through fear and other polarization and so forth. And so and then we have seven bodies called continents that
Hmm.
correspond to the seven heavens, the seven frequencies, the seven energy centers of the chakras, and all of that. And so that's where the gods actually exist, the
Hmm.
so-called gods. That's where Osiris, who became the god of the underworld in his crucifixion, he did not ascend to heaven. He
Hmm.
descended into the subconscious realm to birth the construct of the gods and the Anuna to take over the god spell and all of the rest of that.
Hmm.
And so Mount Meru would be the umbilicus or the belly button of the world,
Hmm.
and it
Yeah.
corresponds to our belly button because we are attached to the umbilicus to our mother, and we nourish while we're in the womb through
Hmm.
the umbilicus that basically is feeding us nutrients and stem cells and genetic information and all the rest of it so that we can birth into who we're supposed to be, but then we're immediately captured and put into the containment
Hmm.
of the legal system and all the rest of that. So back to the bringing Greenland into a unified North and South America to create the master hegemon of the United States from Alaska to Tierra del Fuego, the land of the fire,
Hmm.
which is sort of the sacral or the root point of the Americas. And we're entering into the year of the fire horse, as you
Hmm.
said. So that's the trying to attempt to get the fire of our life spark, our life force at the sacral point, and sacral is corresponding to the word sacrament and
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice and sacred and all the rest of it. And they basically turn what is truly sacred into rearranging the word and
Mm-hmm.
turn it into the word, the anagram, which spells or acronym that spells scared.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're disconnected from that grounding point to the planet, because we've been cut off at the umbilicus and they control it, so the
Mm-hmm.
whole talk right now about why the United States needs the Arctic is because they need to control basically the Arctic region,
Mm-hmm.
which is also melting through their so-called climate change, the warming of the planet,
Mm-hmm.
which is really the melting of the right hemisphere of the Arctic frozen part of our brain, the whole thinking, whole
Mm-hmm.
spherical feminine side of our whole brain.
Mm-hmm.
That frozenness is melting,
Mm-hmm.
which you're trying to still maintain control over,
Mm-hmm.
which of course they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Because as we wake up and we start healing the left side and integrating it with the right side, we return back to being whole thinking beings with both the feminine and the masculine. And we're causing the Arctic to start melting,
Mm-hmm.
which is liberating the emotional trauma and all the rest of it. And they're trying to position it so that they can control it,
Mm-hmm.
but they
As
can't.
usual. Yeah, you know what's interesting in Canada, we have so in the US it's a social security number, right?
Right.
And in Canada it's called SIN, a SIN
Social
number,
insurance number.
social insurance number. And they tell you right there, SIN.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. Just it's everything is a mirror reflection of the inversion.
Yep. Quite a little system that they created, isn't it?
Mm. Yes, it is. So and here we are. Yep,
Here we are. So I kind of think we've reached the end of this discussion. What do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end for part four.
Yeah.
So
We'll see where we go for part five.
exactly. And do you want to say anything else before we
No,
say
just
see you later?
thank you for being who you are and being here together and doing this. This has been wonderful. It's a highlight of my moon cycles is every 2 months, roughly, we get together and we go to the next level. So,
Yeah, this is
um,
great. Maybe recap where you can be found for everybody.
okay,
I mean,
sure.
it's going to be on the YouTube description for
Yeah.
everyone, but it's just nice to.
Well, it's easy enough. If you go to panteravita .org, hang on a second. Let me, why don't we do this? Since we had screen share, I'll just do this
That's
and
a good idea.
we'll just get rid of this guy. Um, and we'll just go here. Um, so we go to panteravita.org. So you can go here
Okay.
and you can see um, the um, the menu items, House of Peace, and there's a document there called the People's Declaration of Peace and Sovereign Integrity, which embodies our principles and our declaration of who we are and what we're creating and manifesting in this world. A Society for Life, there's a declaration of intention of what our will, purpose, and intent to create a reality that is um, basically a life with integrity and respect, honor, and equity for all beings. This is Gemstone University, which really has now been migrated to Gem University. And and Gemma, which is something we are now beginning to build. It's part of our vision for quite a long time, many years, a Earth Media Alliance. And you can read about that, some items of inspiration, um, some basic facts of the court and our law form, how to become a member, and if you wish to donate. So we have that, and we have GEM University. And this is what I wanted to show you. You can go to Freedom Absolute. You can read about what we started a year ago, a new channel about what absolute freedom absolute is. It's not just about law and money, it's about everything that we talk about here. But if you go down here, you can join Patreon, you can join Substack. Once you join and subscribe as a paid member on either of these platforms, then you get the detailed information of how to access and come into the GEM University and all of our education that's in there. And then here's our basic social locations.
Mhm.
And so, and then if you go to Freedom Absolute, here's a Substack, and this is where you go to join. And we've been building this for the last year and adding more and more detail. And we have a YouTube channel where we put these interviews. And this year I'm going to be doing more of my interviewing of people. And
Great.
um, like the man I just talked about, his book.
What was his name?
His name is George St. George.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. um, Uh, so you can go here on Substack and basically take those steps. Subscribe, then you get access to GEM University and all the education. And if you want to read about the law firm in the court, and you could say, which is accurate, that this is in an embryonic or gestational form, something that has gestated for 30 years in my study of law and how
Mm,
to create a truly universal balance system of law and a system of adjudication or settlement of any issues in law or equity. And you can read about that. And it has our foundational documents, which has some of the documents that I just showed you, the declarations and otherwise. So basically, that's where you find us, and or YouTube, Freedom Absolute, or Gemstone University.
wonderful. It's always a
Fabulous.
pleasure.
Thank you. Mutual.
And
Feelings mutual. I'll see you in our dreams at Mount Meru, and
at Mount Meru,
we'll
I'll see you over the ice wall.
and we'll go over the ice wall. We just got to melt some of the frozen elements here, and the wall will open up, and we will open to greater creation and meet our brothers and sisters on the other side who are waiting for us to be liberated and start creating and repopulate the universes and bring the gift of our journey and our genetics and our capacity to create life unlimited. So we'll see you all there soon.
That sounds good. Thanks, Ken. And thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah. See ya.